Creepers use disgusting MO. I'm not sure if this would count as a story that I could share here on Let's Not Meet, but let me tell you guys an unforgettable occurrence last December that happened to me and my friend. I should tell all of you that I live in Manila, Philippines. Being in the city makes us more prone and exposed to all types of crimes, since these people consider Manila to be the place where people are most affluent than those who live in the provinces, and because of this, we are no strangers to petty crimes like mugging and robbery. Since it was December, we were aware to be extra cautious because thieves are more at work during the holidays. It was about 1 in the afternoon, and I just got out of work. I was working as a customer service rep for Dish Network then, so my shift followed US time zones. I was with my friend and colleague, May. We usually commute together because we have the same route when going home. Here in the Philippines, the most common source of transportation is a jeepney, so we got on a jeepney and I sat near its entrance, with May sitting beside me. The jeepney was supposed to load 14 people in total, but when it was about to leave, a man who looked drunk boarded the jeepney and sat beside me, so he was now the one sitting near the entrance. Just 2 minutes after the jeepney drove off, the man started to cough and cough and cough. May and I are quite disgusted and concerned since saliva was pouring out of his mouth. He then acted like he was about to throw up, and one passenger, a man who wore sunglasses, scolded the man and said, "You're disgusting. You're one of those people who drinks and drinks but never hold himself down." The drunk man kept saying sorry, and while all those fuss was happening, 2 guys who looked like they were in their mid-20s asked me to transfer seats and were motioning to sit between them. Being that I was disgusted and alarmed, I sat beside one of those men. The drunk men then asked the jeepney driver to stop the vehicle so he can go down and go to the nearest clinic. The commotion stopped after that, and I was quite relieved that it was over. May and I were sitting opposite sides now, and were facing each other. I glanced up at her and we exchanged what seemed like relieved expressions. A few minutes later, the man beside me, one of the 2 who asked me to transfer seats, told me that I have phlegm at the back of my cardigan. That set off the alarms in my head, because it seemed like one of the most renowned MOs in Manila. And I've read a lot of personal encounters on Facebook about that. The MO will have one man who would pretend to have a fit of cough and will try to spit at the back of your clothing. That man would then go off the vehicle. Men who are also accomplices of this act will then tell you that you have phlegm at the back of your clothing. Naturally, you would look at your back to check. One of the accomplices will then try to help you wipe it with a tissue or a hanky, and while you are distracted, the man beside you would pickpocket or slash your bag and rob you. Then they would go off the vehicle. I know this seems like a very obvious MO, but this has victimized so many people before. Oftentimes, it was the cell phone or the wallet that would be missing. With that being said, the man beside me was being persistent on helping me wipe the phlegm off my cardigan. What I did instead was take it off while clutching my bag tightly towards me. I folded my cardigan and put it inside my bag while checking to see if my phone and wallet were still inside. I looked at the man beside me with my evil look till the 2 of them asked the driver to stop the jeepney so they could go down. A close call. May and I were both relieved and agreed that it was indeed an MO, and even joked about how Christmas really is approaching. That's why lazy, low-life criminals were at large. Needless to say, I was thanking the heavens above and those Facebook posts that made me aware about that disgusting MO. At a rest stop on I-84. This happened to my wife while we were dating. When we started dating, I lived in southern New Hampshire while she lived in Philadelphia. Most of the time I would come down and visit her. Since she works at a college, she had a few weeks off in December. She decided to come up and stay with me. She packed a week's worth of clothing and her cat in her car and drove up after work. Driving on interstates at night means coffee, which means bathroom breaks. She pulls into a rest stop in Connecticut. By rest stop, I mean a bathroom, vending machine, and a rack of tourist brochures. As she's walking towards the building, a man, wearing jeans, an army jacket, and a knit cap walks out between two cars, startling her. The man immediately reaches out and grabs her head with both hands. He's standing in front of her, arms out straight. She's not able to pull his hands off her head. He's staring into her eyes with a detached expression. As she described it, it's the same expression I use when I'm trying to debug code or figure out why something isn't working. He's moving her head back and forth, keeping her off balance while keeping her at arm's length. She stares back. He seems to evaluate her for a minute or two, then lets go and quickly walks into a wooded section. She runs into the rest stop and finds an attendant. She uses the bathroom and then tells the attendant. The attendant is willing to walk her out to her car and make sure that she leaves safely. She walks out with the attendant and notes that a white van that was previously in the lot is gone. She gets in the car, thanks the attendant, and drives off. About 10 minutes later, she's processed what happened and calls me. The bit about the van worried her but terrifies me. We talk for a little bit. She's familiar with law enforcement and offenders, and has a belief that this wasn't just a failed mugging. She talked to the police, and they didn't seem to be too interested in the incident. What worried her the most was that her cat would have suffered in the cold if something happened to her. After that, every time I drove between NH and PA, I'd stop at that rest stop for a few minutes and look for white vans or that man. I don't know what I would have done or what could be done, but perhaps it's some small way of talking myself into believing that we have control over our lives. Perhaps there's a man in a green army jacket who believes he's found a different way of believing he has control over what happens in his life. Encounter with an infamous serial killer. In the late 70s, my uncle was studying medicine at the University of Chicago. After a morning class, he decided that he would hitchhike back home to Lincoln Park on the north side instead to pay for a taxi. The man drove up in a Plymouth Satellites and offered my uncle a ride. The man looked normal and seemed friendly enough, light-hearted even. So my uncle got in the car and they started driving towards Lakeshore Drive. However, once they got there, the man drove south on the lakeshore instead of north, towards Lincoln Park. My uncle told the man he was going the wrong way and to turn around and head north. The man looked at my uncle, put his hand on his knee and said, "No, son, you're coming with me," and smiled darkly at him. My uncle froze in panic, and when they hit traffic near the South Shore, he quickly unlocked the passenger door and ran away without looking back. A year or two later, on a cold day, my uncle was having coffee in a cafe with my future aunt when he caught something on the TV that made his blood run cold. He saw the man that had picked him up from school that day the year before. He had been arrested for the suspected rape and killing of over 20 young men and boys. The man on the television was John Wayne Gacy, and he had removed the door handle off the passenger side door to prevent the men he picked up from escaping. Walking home from dance class. I'm a 17-year-old girl, and I dance quite a lot. Most of my classes are within walking distance. This particular story takes place in December, while preparing for a winter show, so even at 7 p.m. it was pretty dark. I was late for my curfew, so I, instead of walking an extra 5 minutes on the well-lit main road, decided to cut through the cemetery. So I'm walking through the cemetery, feeling creeped out as it is, clutching my pointy shoes like a weapon, when I see someone leaning over a grave and crying. Common sense tells me that it's probably a relative of deceased just mourning, so I keep walking. I get closer to this figure, not particularly worried, until she looks up and starts walking towards me. I walk a little faster. Then she cries out, Wait! I know who you are! And I freeze. I can see your dance shoes. I know that you know her. You're my daughter. Anna, come closer. I missed you. And I swear to God, I thought I was dead. But my phone starts ringing my mom, which snaps me out of my trance and causes me to run home faster than I'd ever run before. Thank you to my mother for enforcing my strict curfew. Needless to say, I never walked home through that cemetery again. Have you ever thought about suicide? Back in December of 2004, doesn't seem real, it's almost been 10 years. I was living in Portland, Oregon, attending college. I was sitting at home one night, writing my last research paper for the term. I had my Yahoo IM up, chatting to a few friends, when a message from someone not on my list pops up. Have you ever thought about suicide? Okay, weird. But hey, it's almost midnight on a Sunday night, and stranger things have been asked to me before. Can I see your tits, etc. So, I messaged the stranger back for kicks. Sure, who hasn't at some point? Why? Well, asking that question opened Pandora's box. He battered me with questions about how I wanted to die, why did I want to die, would I want to die with others, etc. Obviously getting creepier and creepier as the conversation continues, but I play along, assuming the guy's just screwing around with me. I ask him his name, he says it's Jerry, and I ask to see a picture. He sends me to a profile pic on Hot or Not, and asks me if I think he's good looking. I tell him, sure, yeah, you're cute, whatever. He asks to see a picture of me. I send him a random old photo of a girl on my MySpace. Yes, it's that old, I realize now. And he tells me he thinks I'm a 10. Awesome. Thanks, Jerry, who's obsessed with suicide. As the conversation continues, he tells me he's sick of life and women don't seem to be attracted to him, so he wants to end it all. I tell him the things you're supposed to say to people in those types of situations, like relationships or nothing. You're more important to the people in your life. Don't do it. Blah, 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 blah. I'm not heartless, but I just don't feel like talking to someone off of a ledge at now 1 a.m. He tells me he's met a lot of women online that want to kill themselves and that he's planning a party for Valentine's Day 1.5 months from now, so everyone can come and do it together at his house in Klamath Falls, Oregon. He's asked me if I'm interested in joining. I say, yeah, sure, but make an excuse that I don't have a car to get down there for it. He tells me there are a few women from Portland coming down for it, and one of them has a van. He's sure I can catch a ride. He says he's built a beam in his home that'll hold up to 50 bodies at once, but that I shouldn't wear shoes because they'll weigh me down. By now, yes, I'm starting to realize this guy is acting very serious, and this is in fact not a joke. So I start asking him specifics, what his address is, what his full name is, who are the women traveling to Portland. He tells me their names, and that one of them is bringing her 5 children with her, and that they want to die as well. Huge red flags are up at this point, so while I'm still chatting with him, I call a friend of mine back in Eastern Oregon who works as a 911 dispatcher. She's actually at work when I call her, and after telling her the whole story, she advises me to hang up and call Portland Police Department right now. At least give them the info to pass to Klamath Falls. She makes a record in their system that I've called just in case. I keep talking to Jerry and call the Portland police. They send 2 officers out about an hour later, and they pretty much laugh at me when I explain to them what's going on. I print our chat log out, give them the guy's full name and address I've already verified through Google being as legit, and they tell me to just quit talking to him, simple as that, and go about their business. Do I feel stupid now? I call my friend back home and tell her what Portland PD did, and she said she'll keep an eye on things. If he keeps talking, just keep saving the conversation. So I do that for another 2 hours, and things just get to the point where I can't handle him anymore. He's battering me with questions about how do I want to die, wearing clothes or naked. Do I want to have sex before I die? Would I have a problem killing kids before? Would I want to hold hands with other while we hang? Finally, I just told him I'd be in touch closer to Valentine's Day. For the most part, I laughed it off with some friends, because Portland PD never got back to me about anything. So of course I assumed it ended up being a very strange prank. Fast forward, February 10th, 2005. A friend of mine calls me while I'm on campus on my way to work and tells me some guy in Klamath Falls has been arrested for trying to set up a mass suicide pact for Valentine's Day. I'm floored. I run to my office, log into a computer, and sure enough, it's everywhere on all news forums. Gerald Crean, arrested for plotting mass suicide Valentine's Day party. My friend from back home sees the news and calls me, tells me I need to call back to Portland PD and tell them I called this in back in December. I make the call, and an hour later, 2 FBI agents are coming to pick me up at my job, taking me home and taking my entire computer to be analyzed. We sit in my living room and I'm questioned over and over about my involvement and if I was planning to commit suicide. I kept telling them over and over that I just talked to the guy as a joke, thought it was some sort of prank, that I only called the cops when he started talking about some woman from Portland bringing her kids. And I'd given all the information to the Portland PD's officers back in December. How was I supposed to know? They never did anything with it. Which they didn't. They sat on it, probably shredded it, and never even sent any of the information to Klamath Falls. The agents tell me the story has gone a lot bigger, and that Crean had contacted hundreds of people. At least 30 had agreed to come on Valentine's Day to his house and commit suicide together. One woman, her parents found some emails between she and Crean and called the police. That's how they finally got involved. Not from me nearly 2 months ago. This happened less than a week before Valentine's Day. I'm freaked out. They drop me back off at the college, and I tell my boss everything that's happened. She's telling me that reporters have been calling nonstop since I left, wanting to talk to me. She said she didn't give them my cell phone number, but that she thought it was only a matter of time before they showed up at the office. I was a student worker. My name is on the campus website directory. If the AP got a hold of a police report, there was no saying how fast they could start tracking me down. I called my mom, tell her what happened. She tells me she'll be up that evening to come get me and bring me home from her break. I take 4 days off, turn in what assignments I have left. The FBI has the rest on my tower, and head off to Eastern Oregon to wait out the media. Big mistake. Huge. Because by the time I made it back home that night, they'd already tracked down my brother and my sister-in-law. Thought it was so cool that ABC and CNN wanted to talk to me. She gave them my parents' address and my cell phone number. I was harassed, chased down, and semi-terrorized until I finally gave an interview to Good Morning America. I hoped it would die down then. The story was out. Who cares? Wrong, wrong. Apparently every friggin' person out there cares until you give them the 15 seconds of conversations the others didn't get. I had my 15 seconds of fame, and I never want to deal with that shit again. Crean is still sitting in the Salem State Hospital for his crimes of solicitation to commit murder. Mister, have you ever thought of suicide? Let's not meet in real life. Creepy sledding story. I was 12 or 13, and it was the middle of December. It was snowing all day, and since I went to a private school that people come all over the country, they decided to close school for the following day. My backyard is pretty much one huge hill with a very steep beginning and makes it extremely good for sledding. With the school being closed the next day, I invited my buddy to stay the night so we can make a sledding track and sled all night. It was around 10 or 11-ish when my buddy noticed a car idling in the street about 500 feet from my house. There should have been some bells that went off, since my street is really only for residents, and there is literally zero through traffic. But we were enjoying ourselves, and shortly dismissed the fact. A couple minutes later, My buddy and I realized that there was a faint smell of cigarette smoke coming from somewhere. At this point, I am at the top of the hill, and my buddy was at the bottom. I see him and he's not moving, but staring behind me. I turn around, and about 15 feet from me is a guy. He is not moving except for the occasional drag of the cigarette, and I turn and run all the way down the hill into my basement, and that is the first time I've ever locked the doors. I have no idea how he knew we were there, but one of the creepiest encounters I have came across. Fishing hooks and lures. This went on over the course of a year, with the last incident taking place in December of 2016. I used to own this green 1998 Toyota Camry. It was my grandmother's until she gifted it to my parents, who eventually gave it to me as my first car. It was nice and reliable, but I have a bad habit of letting my cars accumulate a bunch of stuff before cleaning them out. Because I still lived with my parents, they would use the car from time to time if they needed it. One day, I noticed a bunch of fishing lines with hooks on them in the back of my car, and on one of the rare occasions that I clean it out, a bunch of the hooks are embedded into the upholstery, and more are between the creases on the seat. It takes me a while to get them all out, and I almost prick myself several times doing it. I have no idea how long they were there, as the last time I've cleaned this much of my car out was months ago. At any rate, I'm annoyed. At first, I thought that my dad had put them there, as he had recently used my car to transport a bunch of old junk for a garage sale. I asked him about it, but he told me he's never seen any fishing hooks or lines in any of the old stuff of ours, and nobody in my family even fishes, so it wouldn't make any sense for us to have it. He's also the only other person that has used my car at all in the past year or two. I'm the kind of person who locks up everything, every night. I triple check my car doors, and if I'm even a little uncertain as to whether or not I locked up, I'll go back to my car and check, no matter the inconvenience. I also park it where I can see it from my bedroom window, and hear if anyone tampers with it, so I doubt anyone could have broken in and just assume my dad missed it, and didn't think anything more of it until a month later, when I found even more fishing hooks in my back seat. At this point, I asked my dad about it again, and he figures I'm either pulling a weird prank on him or someone is breaking into my car. I wonder though why anyone would just break into my car and not steal anything out of it, and just leave fishing hooks instead. It didn't make any sense to me. To give you an idea of how weird it is, I live in a neighborhood where everyone knows everyone. We all talk, and even have a private Facebook group that started due to a drug house at the end of the street cropping up, and as a sort of neighborhood watch group that always posts whenever something suspicious happens, so I don't have any neighbors I don't know for miles, and none of the ones I do know are this shady. Again, without any explanations or clear motive, as the days and week pass, it fades to the back of my head. I get a new job selling mattresses, as I've been unemployed focusing on school for a while. I move out of my parents' house to live with my girlfriend. This is where things turn from weird to extremely unsettling. One night, we decide to go to a nearby Winco to get something to make food with, and I notice my back seat has a bunch of fishing lines and hooks in it again. Startled, I look around for any sign of someone being nearby. I tell her to get in the back of the house, and I sit up and stare at my car until morning comes from our bedroom window. Of course, I didn't see anyone or anything. Eventually, I get ready for work, and she gets ready for her college courses, and we leave. The store I was working at during this time had a weird L-shaped design to it, with two different entrances and a cafe taking up the space between them. There was one entrance that was easily visible from the front desk, and another you would have to get up to go see. As I was closing up the night after the last incident, I go to turn off the open signs and see in the center of the obscured hallway an entire roll of fishing line. Call it up. but was on the line leading to the door, where a pile of hooks sat. I had no customers that day, and never heard the door alarm go off. I then noticed someone had turned the door alarms off, but neither I nor my only coworker had ever tampered with the device before, and it was behind the front desk I was shaking. Someone had been stalking me and leaving these lines, but I had no idea what to do. Call the police? Other than the fishing lines and hooks, there was really nothing to trace back to anyone for anything. My store has no cameras, and corporate would never agree to installing them. Neither mine nor my girlfriend's family could afford security cameras either. I figured the best I could do would be not to appear as frightened as I was, in case whoever was doing this was watching me. I thought that if seeing something like this didn't make me go about my day any differently, and I didn't give whatever reaction this person was looking for, then they would give up and go away. For several more months, I would find fishing lines and hooks in my car, despite it being locked and my parents being too much busy with their construction of their new house and their own jobs to take time out of their own to prank me. Once or twice, I would leave notes in my car asking whoever it was why they were doing this and to stop, and I would find the notes gone whenever the lines and hooks appeared, but with no responses. Eventually, after a series of misunderstandings and disagreements with her family, I decided to move out of my girlfriend's house and move in with a couple friends into their apartment until my parents' new house could be completed. The very last time I had an encounter with the lines and hooks, I came home from work to find them strewn about the living room. Stuff was knocked over, and a few things broken, but nothing was taken. My friend, his girlfriend, and their baby were all gone at the time, so no one was home when this happened, save for his cats, which were absolutely spooked and wouldn't come out from under the bed for hours. I still don't know what this person wants and wanted, why they were stalking me in the first place, or what the fishing lines and hooks meant. No one I know is huge into fishing, and I specifically go out of my way not to make enemies or cross people, even purposefully giving people more than I take from them, so that I don't seem like I'm out for myself. I really don't know if it was someone I know or a stranger really good at covering their tracks and freaking people out. All I know is that I will have anxiety over this for the rest of my life, and I routinely stay up until 4 or 5 in the morning, because in addition to several other traumatizing experiences, this has made every bump in the night a potential threat to me. It's been almost 9 months since I've seen anything more from this person, but instead of feeling better, I feel more uneasy that someone followed me through that many changes in my life and didn't do anything further than breaking into my work and my friend's house, but that any time they could, because no safety measures seemed able to deter them. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed the read. I'm shaking as I'm typing this out. I haven't really talked in great detail with anyone about it, because just describing it makes me feel like a loon. Not only that, but I don't want to worry my friends and family when there's nothing they can do about it, or vindicate them if it's one of them that pulled a prank on me. This will likely be a mystery I never see solved. Please, I'm only 17. This happened to me a couple years ago, and I happened to be walking home on a late night on a bicycle path which followed a train track. This was a popular route I've been familiar with since I was a kid, with the convenience of no vehicles at the time. I had my headphones in and was mindlessly lost in my thoughts, since it was winter at the time, and trying to distract myself from the cold. Once in a while, I did see a couple cyclers on their bikes pass me here and there, which wasn't too odd, but occasionally, I would look back to see if anyone was following me. There he stood, walking a safe distance, and I didn't think much to it. Maybe he was getting off work just like I was, and was heading back home just like I was. I quickened my pace in hopes to outwalk him, but it seemed the faster I walked, the smaller the distance between us had gone. I overlooked my shoulder and got a good look at him. Oddly enough, he was wearing sunglasses at this time of night, so I couldn't get a glimpse of his eyes. A scruffy man who's forgotten to shave for a couple weeks and neglected a shower, who was wearing a thick jacket with a hoodie covering his features. He stood a good foot over me as I'm only 5 feet tall. He began making small talk, asking me how my night's going, and telling me he just got off of work and was meeting up with his brother at the end of the trail to get picked up. I was trying to standoffish with my comments by keeping the conversation short, because I realized it was the middle of the night. I was a 17-year-old girl walking by herself home, and if I screamed, nobody could hear me. He was probably walking with me a good 15 minutes before he started asking me if he could borrow my phone to call his brother, since he didn't have one. At this point, I didn't know what to do, because I had no means of escape. I had nowhere to run, and this man could attack me at any time. I told him the trail didn't end for another 10 minutes, and he could wait until we got there to call his brother. He started getting irritated and told me he wanted his brother already to be there. Since it was the middle of winter, I gave in, and he dialed in some numbers, and I swear this is where my stomach dropped, because his conversation went exactly like this without pause. Hey, how you doing? Yeah, just pick me up. Their work was fine, and I'm doing good, but I'll just see you another couple minutes before I see you. I'll talk to you later. At least when you're faking a phone call, you can at least pause between your topics. After he hung up, he asked me to walk back to his place, with him the other direction. I asked him what about his brother who was going to pick him up. He told me not to worry about it, that his place was only a couple minutes away and to come with him. I told him I was getting uncomfortable, if I could have my phone back, and that it was getting late. This is when I saw a turn in his demeanor. His face changed, and so did the tone of his voice. He clenched my arm tightly and told me it was going to be fun, and tried to persuade me in the other direction by pulling me. I started crying and pleaded him to stop, only to have him disrupt me with, "Shut the fuck up before I smash your phone into a million pieces." I started begging him, and I told him my parents were waiting for me at home, that I had an older brother who was expecting me to be home since this was December. It was only a days away from Christmas. There was no change in his demeanor, as he violently forced me to the opposite way of the bicycle path. I looked at him and I told him, "Please, I'm only 17. I'm applying for universities in a couple months. I have so much going for me right now." His grip suddenly loosened, and he dropped his hand. For a good 30 seconds, there was just silence, and I contemplated if I should have ran. He lifted the silence with a question. "Okay, so what can you do for me then?" I told him I had some cash on me, and I'd just give him the rest of it if he would just let me go. He agreed with me and handed my phone back as I handed him $50. I watched him walk the opposite direction. He followed me on the bicycle path until he disappeared, and then I sprinted my way back home. When I got back to my house and looked at my call log, the numbers he dialed were so random and didn't follow a typical 10-digit number in America. Who knows what he would have done to me? So creepy guy who tried to force me to go to his place. Let's not meet again. Anthro Joe. I first met Joe in my freshman year of college. I just made the move from a big city to a very small town to meet with my long-distance boyfriend of 4 years. I had no friends in this new town and was eager to meet people. Joe was in my anthropology class. He was friendly, played guitar, and liked horror movies like me. I'm a geeky girl and a little shy, so naturally he approached me first. Joe introduced me to his friends, most of whom had been there for years. He was in his late 20s as well, and all of whom were very welcoming. For the entire semester, I spent time with them in between classes, and I still consider many of them to be dear friends. The first incident occurred in early December. Finals were approaching, and so more students were in the parking lot than usual, running out of space. A couple cars parked out of the lines, completely boxing me in. I walked up to Joe grumbling about how I would have to sit at school all evening until those students left. "What kind of car do you have?" "A black Geo, why?" "I can take a crowbar to their windshields if you want. I would do that for you." I definitely felt uneasy at this point, but I'm too forgiving a person and decided to put it behind me. On the second occurrence, I was exhausted, walking between classes. I ran into Joe in the hallway, and he suggested I go home. "No, I might as well stay here. I need to meet my boyfriend at the gym 2 blocks down in an hour anyways." "You look tired. Do you want to go to the gym?" "Not really, but I promised my boyfriend, so I will." "If you want," Joe said, "I can kill your boyfriend for you." I still believe to this day that he was joking, but regardless, this creeped me out big time. I remember asking him what his fucking problem was and walking away. I managed to avoid him all semester after that, but the next semester, on the very first day of school, guess who was holding the front door open for me? "Hey, still with that guy?" "My boyfriend of 5 years, yeah. Not really planning on dropping that relationship." "Weird. You're like the only girl I know who's still with her boyfriend." "Okay." As if peer pressure would push me to follow all these fictional girls who left their boyfriends. "Well, you should leave him." "No, I shouldn't. You should leave me alone." A week later, for a sociology class on crime, I had to do research on the public court database. I opened the site designated for my state, and out of pure curiosity, decided to enter the names of the people I know. Sarah, nothing. Amy, nothing. Hannah, speeding ticket. Jacob, underage drinking. Joe. Rape of a child. 3 counts sexual harassment. 2 counts destruction of private property. Battery. Pled guilty to all charges. Bow to your sensei. This will be a change in tone for Let's Not Meet, not a scary encounter, but definitely a funny and odd one. This happened around December 2008. My best friend Andy and I were hanging out at a restaurant tavern in Springdale. Andy always gets really sociable after a few drinks, and at some point after we've been there a while, he strikes up a conversation with a guy sitting next to us. He's probably in his late 40s, wearing a heavy Carhartt jacket and blue jeans, spattered with drywall mud. We didn't have to talk to him long to realize he's obviously been at the bar a lot longer than us. Dude was well past buzzed and on his way to fried. The conversation is really random, and at some point he mentions being a fairly advanced martial arts practitioner. I don't remember what degree of black belt he claimed, or which discipline. Anyways, we're getting pretty buzzed ourselves, and the conversation is all over the place when at some point he says something that tips us off that he's not a native of the area, so we ask, "So you're not from around here?" That's when he learned his sad tale. He came to Cincy on the lam to work construction jobs after a tragic accident. He was at a big outdoor party when, for no reason, a man charged at him with a baseball bat. The guy from the pub was startled and reacted the way he had been trained. Bruce Lee said in Enter the Dragon, "I do not hit, it hits all by itself." It was just so with our new friend. His fists and feet moved like lightning, and before he knew what was happening, he had broken the bat and killed the other man with his bare hands. We swore we would keep a secret, and talked about other things, but later, shortly before last call, Andy asked, "Do you think you could teach us the martial arts so that we could defend ourselves and be powerful enough to kill a man with our hands?" The man's face became grave. "You will be my students." but when I teach you the martial arts, you will never need to strike down another man, because the inner calm and tranquility flowing through you will prevent you from taking human life. We never saw him again. Unjustly accused fugitive drywall sensei, I am still waiting for those lessons. Persistence. Hello, first post here. After finding the sub, I just had to share my story. After my parents divorced, my mom started dating a man who she had known for a few years, a tennis player who used to coach women's tennis at a nearby university. Now, I did not like this guy, but I was only 14, and I was still very bitter about the divorce, so I think it's safe to say I disliked anyone my mom decided to date. One day, my mom was dropping me off at my new boyfriend's house and meeting his parents. This boy also played tennis, so my mom struck up conversations with his parents about her boyfriend. Upon hearing where he used to coach, the dad said, "Wasn't there an issue with sexual harassment there a few years ago?" My mom asked her boyfriend about it that night, and according to her, he empathetically insisted that it was another coach, and was just a misunderstanding anyhow. Okay, as if that wasn't a red flag. My mom continued to date him for a few more months, but in January, she decided to end things. She told me he hadn't taken up the breakup well. Now, here's where things get uncomfortable. The next month, the day after Valentine's Day, I was at school, my mom was at work, and my older sister was staying at home because she was sick. She was sitting on the couch in the living room watching TV when suddenly she hears the doorknob jiggle, but it's locked. She was very startled and stayed frozen on the couch, trying to come up with who might have been trying to come inside. Our mom coming home early? Our dad stopping by to drop off the makeup bag she left at his house last weekend? Then, to her horror, she watched the lock click over to the unlocked position, and in walks my mother's ex. Shocked, she stammered out his name, and when he looked over at her, he seemed just as surprised to see her there, so he backed out the door, closed it, and left. It was pretty clear that he was expecting no one to be home. After my sister had calmed down, she got out to lock the door again, and then she called my mom to tell her what had happened. My mom had the locks changed the next day, but we all felt uneasy living in that house. Several months later, once the lease expired, we moved to another house. Fast forward to December, it was close to Christmas, and we received an unaddressed envelope in our mailbox. Inside was a Christmas card that contained 2 iTunes gift cards, intended for my sister and I, and a Starbucks gift card for my mom. Keep in mind that each was worth $50. The card was signed Santa, in his handwriting. How he knew our new address beats me. That was the last time we ever heard from him, so hopefully he's found closure and won't bug us anymore. What do you want for Christmas, little girls? I grew up in suburban New Jersey, and one year in December it was really unseasonably warm, like 60 degrees in the evening. So me, 6 years old, and my sister, 4, were playing outside in the front yard, because it's usually like 30, so we took advantage. It was dark out, but it was so warm we figured we had to play outside. The front door was open, but my parents weren't in direct view because they were busy dragging the Christmas decorations out from the crawl space. There was a man walking down the sidewalk. We didn't think much of this, because that was normal for our friendly neighborhood, but he started walking up the grass to our front lawn towards us. With the creepiest friggin' grin, growled, "What do you want for Christmas, little girls?" And we both ran into the house. 20 years after the fact, I kind of regard the memory as a false memory or a dream because it felt so unreal. So, I asked my sister about the incident and she said, "What the fuck, that was real?" I thought it was a dream too. So I guess you both repressed the memory of almost getting kidnapped by a weirdo.